BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hi, I'm Poppy O'Toole. I'm a chef, cookbook author, and thanks to TikTok, somehow now known as the Potato Queen.
Hello, and welcome to Potato TikTok, or as some may call it, the Promised Land.
Potato Queen herself, Poppy O'Toole.
Oh, I like Poppy. She cooks potatoes in lots of different ways.
Beautiful colour and a super glisten, crispiness. This could be a step too far. I mean, is that wrong?
I mean, is it wrong? I was dipping a roast potato that had been cooked in clotted cream into clotted cream, so that was probably a step too far, even for me. But I still stand by it. Despite all that, I went on Mastermind and chose the history of potatoes as my specialist subject. Well, let's just say it didn't quite go to plan.
An indented area on the surface of a potato, often containing a bud, where a new plant may sprout, is commonly known by what name, likening it to a facial feature?
Nose?
No, eye. In 1778, as part of a campaign to promote potatoes as a foodstuff, which French pharmacist hosted an exclusive dinner in Paris, in which all the courses were made from potatoes?
I know this. I can't think. Crumb.
No, it's Parmentier. What popular children's toy, created by George Lerner, and contained a set of plastic body parts, including arms, legs, eyes and ears, that were used to decorate a real potato?
Mr. Potato Head.
Yes. Although
All I can say is thank goodness for Mr. Potato Head.
You had no passes, and at the end of that round, you've got 4 points.
Thank you very much.
Clive Myrie putting me under the spotlight in that iconic chair last year. I love potatoes, but I want to know more about them. And not just some quiz night facts. I want to understand their history and know how and why the potato became such a staple in our diets. And I want to understand what its future may look like. So for this week, I'm joining the team at the food programme in the hope of unearthing some amazing potato stories. From the thousands of varieties still grown in the Andes to the diseases that threaten crops around the world, growing potatoes is anything but simple. It's a story of biodiversity, resilience, and constant reinvention. To start at the beginning, I'm meeting up with Professor Rebecca Earle, a historian of food at the University of Warwick, who's written 2 whole books on potatoes. The first about the politics of the potato.
Where potatoes originated is already a slightly political topic. There was a bit of controversy between Peru and Chile when the Peruvian government, I think, tried to proclaim that potatoes were Peruvian patrimony. And Chile said, over here, wait a minute. But in fact, wild potatoes grew all up and down the spine of the mountains that runs from the Rockies all the way down to the southern tip of South America. But they're so adaptable that they grow almost everywhere. India has become a leader in breeding potatoes that grow in tropical and semi-tropical climates, for example.
When did they get to Europe then? It was in invasions in South America.
So Europeans arrived in South America in the early 1500s. They set off, looking for something to conquer, and they found it in the form of the Inca Empire, which had various different foodstuffs that were important to them. The potato was one of those. And Europeans, in particular, the people who had been involved in invading the Inca Empire, were the people who brought potatoes back to Europe.
Did the Europeans like potatoes when they first came over, or were they a little bit cautious of them?
Well, that was one of the things that made me really want to write about potatoes, because I thought that a lot of the scholarship was really misguided about this. So there's an old scholarship that says that when potatoes reached Europe, Europeans ran away in fear because they were weird, because they weren't mentioned in the Bible, because they grew underground in a knobbly fashion rather than growing from seeds like a proper plant. And there was a whole series of things that were said, almost none of which made any sense to me. So one of the things I set about doing was trying to find some evidence of how ordinary people in particular reacted to potatoes. And the evidence seemed to be telling me was that ordinary people, not everywhere in Europe, but in many different parts of Europe, were very enthusiastic about potatoes because they grow well. They're a prolific crop. They're very, very nutritious. They fill you up. They produce a more filling crop from a small patch of land, way better than wheat or rye or oats. And they weren't, at least initially, getting taxed.
Oh, okay. So they could grow these without getting a tax on growing them and selling them. Because tax is a big thing. It was big back then, it's big now.
So potatoes kind of flew under the radar of the tax system for quite a long time. And in fact, that's a good source for tracking the history of potatoes, because when people being the church, would typically levy a tax on things that you grew, particularly if they were for sale. Okay. And so you start getting court cases really in the 1700s of clergy starting to say, you know, those potatoes you're growing, actually you owe us a tithe on that as well. And villagers would sometimes say, no, we've been growing these since time out of mind and we've never paid a tax on them, so don't you try to start now. And you get a court case and then you get documents and then historians get evidence.
Oh, wow. Because I've heard the stories of like everyone was terrified of potatoes, they're poisonous and they get locked up in the square somewhere, and I don't know what story that is, but it's...
I can tell you.
Thank you. No, Rebecca, please tell us the story of what I'm trying to think of.
So something happened to potatoes in terms of their public profile in the 18th century during the Enlightenment. Potatoes, which had been of very little interest to states, started to take on a public visibility. It was their moment of glory. In the 18th century, new ideas of what it meant to govern properly started to emerge. And there started to be more and more focus on the importance of building up a hearty population of vigorous labourers who could become sailors to help Britain defeat France in the endless wars that were going on between different Western European powers. So there was a quest for nourishing foods, ideally very cheap foods, possibly foods that people could grow themselves. And potatoes became really first among equals.
Rebecca says what happened then was a lot of promotion all over Europe to get people eating potatoes. There were all sorts of competitions and PR, and...
This has attracted the attention of historians who've noticed that there was a great flurry around potatoes in the 18th century and who have incorrectly concluded that that meant nobody was eating them beforehand. Right? What was going on is politics started getting interested in the potato. So the story that you were talking about is a French story about somebody called Antoine-Augustin Parmentier, who's now immortalized in the French version of shepherd's pie, basically.
Yes, I've had it a few times, and I didn't know when I was in restaurants and we made Parmentier potatoes. I just thought that was just what they were called. I never knew the story.
So he was a super potato promoter in France. What he supposedly did is had a field of potatoes planted and then posted guards very visibly around the edge of this field, but instructed the guards that they should disappear at night.
To let people go and pick them.
Yes, and that the idea was that people would figure out anything that was so valuable it was being guarded, must be desirable, and people would creep in and steal the potatoes, and the rest is history, right? People would start eating them.
Amazing. Great PR.
Yeah.
What a great PR campaign.
Interestingly, there are very similar stories from like Greece and many different parts of Europe, so I have considerable doubt about, about these stories. But this is part of this potato promotion legend.
Professor Rebecca Earle from the University of Warwick busting some potato myths for me and helping me understand some more of how spuds became such a staple. They were tasty and tax-free. Chatting about South America with Professor Rebecca got me really craving Peruvian food. And just down the road from London's BBC Broadcasting House is a restaurant called Lima, which I think is one of those places that brought Peruvian cuisine into the spotlight and made dishes like ceviche familiar to loads of food lovers. I popped in for a chat with the sous chef William Coz, who's originally from the capital Lima, who told me that potatoes are still a really important part of the country's food culture and explained how they use them now. We started chatting about a trip I made to Peru a few years ago and my visit to the market in the city of Cusco. There was like bags and buckets and potatoes everywhere, varieties I've never seen.
You can see potatoes of every color, purples, red, yellow, every color.
And they're all kind of wiggly wobbly.
They are not all round like here in the UK, no?
What sort of dishes did you grow up with that included potatoes?
Well, in Lima we have a famous dish that is causa limeña, that is kind of mashed potato, that we mix it with chilies, lime and oil, and we can fill it with, I don't know, chicken, octopus or whatever, crab.
So you kind of make a mash and then mould it around a meat in the middle, no?
We do kind of lasagna. First layer of potato, then some filling It's kind of a salad with a potato mashed.
That sounds like the best potato salad I've ever heard.
Yeah. It's nice. Actually, in this restaurant, we have it with crab. So it's kind of fancy, no?
So what other things do you have on at the restaurant that include potatoes that I suppose are elevated slightly from the home style that you'd have in Peru?
We have Secreto Ibérico pork that we put like blue potatoes that are kind of the same of Peru.
Yeah.
Also, we have dry potatoes that we have to cook it like for long, yeah.
And something that I find really interesting is the freeze-dried potato kind of originated in the Andes. Like they used to put the potatoes out to dry and then freeze overnight and then stomp them, is that right, or something like that? And then I can't remember quite the method, but I remember being in Machu Picchu and them telling me about it.
Yeah, they do it in the Andes. It's like drying potatoes in the sun. And also they do the same with another potato. The name is chuño. It's kind of fermented potato.
Does that get used into recipes, or is that like a fermentation on the side?
They use it in stews. And stews, also in drinks.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was an incredible thing. The Incas, isn't it? They learned how to do the agriculture and how to grow them, and then they were brought over here. So we need to give a bit more recognition to South America and the Andes.
Yeah, that's true. Now in Peru, they are saying that we have one potato more because of the Pope. Yeah, because the Pope is Peruvian now.
Yeah.
Well, it's American Peruvian.
Yeah.
So potato is papa in Peru. We say that we have one Pope more.
Oh
no?
my goodness,
one,
I love
one
that.
more.
Yeah, so one papa more.
Yeah, one more.
William Coz there, sous chef at Lima, Fitzrovia, and I'm definitely going to have a go at making that lime chilli and salt salad mashed potato situation. It sounds absolutely delicious. But it's said that there's still around 4,000 varieties of potato grown in Peru, which I find it really hard to even wrap my head around. How can there be so many different varieties, and who is growing all of them? To find out, I've been speaking to an organisation dedicated entirely to protecting the future of the potato. It's called one of the coolest names I think I've ever heard in my life, the International Potato Centre. Dr Stef de Haan works there.
Actually, a few years ago, people assumed that all the modern potatoes, the ones that we tend to grow in Europe and in the US, which come from breeding programs, that it would just be a matter of time that they would replace all the traditional varieties. But we actually see that the traditional varieties have so many outstanding traits, especially for the indigenous population, that genetic erosion doesn't actually happen so quickly.
Stef says farmers in the Andes use a mix of modern and ancient techniques tailored to the landscape and the soil. While Peru's managed to keep hold of its potato diversity, Stef's still worried about its future, especially whether younger generations will keep it going in years to come.
I think the intergenerational change is the most pressing challenge, really. I'm not so worried about climate change because I think, for example, in Peru we have 3,000 potato land races. That's exactly where the security is for adaptation to climate change. So one really nice example that we have is a citizen science contest. It's called the Little Guardians of the Potato. And it's basically children and the teachers, they can observe the potatoes and register the potatoes. And that helps to track the diversity of the potatoes. But it also generates dialogue between parents, grandparents and the children.
One thing that I think is amazing about all of the potato varieties in Peru is that you have these gorgeous colours. What are some of the varieties that you have, and how many kind of different varieties does a general farmer grow in Peru? You know, there's like 4,000 varieties. They're not growing all of them. Which ones are the main ones that they like to grow?
Yes. So a typical farmer, like a typical Andean farmer, an average farmer would at least have probably between 15 and 20 different varieties. And then you have these special types of farmers. They're called custodian farmers, or in Quechua, they're also called yachachiks. They're kind of almost like stamp collectors or like coin collectors. They have this special passion, and they can have up to 200 different land races just in one family. Then the way to grow them, the traditional way of growing them in Quechua is called chahru or huachuy. It's growing them in mixtures. So you don't grow them separately, you all grow them in mixtures. And that's kind of like a survival of the fittest. And then there's so much to tell about the names and the nomenclature. It often refers to symbols or objects that surround the environment. So you have one potato that's a black potato. It looks like a puma paw. So it's called pumapa makin. It's like a paw in Quechua. Then you have, last week I was harvesting potatoes. There was pajocha senja, which means the alpaca nose. So it looks like the nose of an alpaca. Sometimes they also have very funny names. I think the one that is quite well known, particularly in Peru, is this potato. It's called yumchuy wahachi or hachum wahachi, which means make your daughter-in-law cry. And it's a potato that has very deep eyes. It used to be used as a test for your daughter-in-law, whether to see if she could really peel potatoes.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that would make me cry. I peel a lot of potatoes, so having one that's difficult to peel would do my head in. I was gonna ask, why is there so many different colours of potatoes in the Andes?
All the crops in the Andes have color. Almost all the crops look like the traditional weavings, or they look like a jazz composition. They're almost like art. It's not only potato, it's also quinoa. You have black quinoa, red quinoa, purple quinoa, and it's the same with maize. If you see the corn or maize varieties, it's amazing that you get all these colors like the rainbow. That part is definitely culture. People have this passion for colors on their plate, especially this time of the year when you get this produce of the mixed land races. That's just like the best food you can ever eat, and you don't need to eat it in a fancy restaurant. Just sitting together with a farmer family next to the field and having this earth oven, which is called pachamanca or watia, and just take the steamed potatoes out of the earth, and everybody looking at the pile of the mixed land races, and then you can choose from 20 different land races, and of course you can only eat 10 potatoes, so you have to choose carefully which one you want to try. So that's actually the best. You don't need a lot. You need a little bit of ají, a little bit of spice, maybe a little bit of cheese, and that's the fanciest food you can have.
Dr. Stef de Haan from the International Potato Centre based in Lima, Peru. After all this talk of growing potatoes, I wanted to get myself onto a real potato farm in the UK and see how it's being done here. It is officially a glorious day in Suffolk. It's a kind of day that makes the countryside feel like it's literally glowing, like it is beautiful. I'm standing in the middle of a field, and under the soil, potatoes, and millions of them. This is James Foskett's farm, a major grower of both organic and conventional potatoes, as well as a load of other veg. But potatoes are his main crop.
You can see the end of the field, just down below, is the Deben Valley. We're only about 3-4 miles from the sea, but that all helps to warm soils early and to give us early crops of vegetables and potatoes.
So what sort of potatoes are growing here? Because I've just picked up a little one from the ground, and the soil feels lovely. It's quite sandy. It's kind of like it blows off in the wind.
Yeah, these are Maris Pear we're harvesting here today. They've been topped off for 10 days because they got to size. Because it's been warm, they've just died off. So they haven't been sprayed off.
Getting rid of the green bit.
Green bit, yeah.
I've got one in my hand as well. They are gorgeous. They look like a mini Maris Piper. The skin's similar. I can see the inside when I take a bit of the peel off. It is that lovely white flesh. So they fairly starchy potatoes, or?
No, they're a little bit waxy, which is great for a salad potato.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of new varieties at the moment coming along, which are taking quite a lot of breeding, but they're helping us with yields and with blight resistance, which is really important in what we're doing. So the Maris Pear is getting put to one side a little bit, and the other one we grow, which will be next in line next week, probably will be Charlotte. Charlotte is one of my favourite potatoes, but we'll go on to those because they're about as early as Maris Pear. Thing about it, Pear and Charlotte are not the earliest varieties out there.
Okay.
Now, if I grew Rocket, I'd have had those ready to lift 15th of May. But when they skin, the flesh will go brown and won't stay nice and white or slightly yellow, and because the supermarkets don't like them.
So they oxidise really easily compared to the other potatoes. Oh look, there's the harvester coming back.
It's a Veritron, self-propelled. It's a few years old now, but a new one's £750,000, so we don't change them too often. It's got a tank on it which holds about 6 tonnes, so it's filling the tank up at the moment. It's got a digger share on the front, that's taking all the soil up the main web and protecting the potatoes, and then it's going up onto a platform at the top where there's 4 individuals handpicking any stones or greens or broken ones out, and then they drop into the tank.
Wow, so there's people in there?
Yeah, there's 4 people in the back. They're under the canopy, protected from the sun.
Obviously you can't see it, but this is a huge red, it looks like a massive crab. It's coming over us! How big is this field and crop? How much will you get from here? Because this is a massive, I can't even see where it finishes.
This is about 11 hectares, which is 27 acres. Yields have been quite good this year, and the key to early potato yields is about the tuber numbers. We can help manipulate tuber numbers, partly with variety, but we chip the seed over winter to give it the earliness. We actually use ethanol a lot of the time to stimulate more sprouts coming off a mother tuber. And then we need a spring like this, which has had lots of sunshine. The goal for us is to get over 1 million tubers a hectare. And our test digs show us that we're on about 1.1 million in this field. And I've got, so the next field is nearly 1.3 million.
Sounds like a hell of a lot of potatoes.
But you can imagine how much water we've had to use. You know, this field's been getting water every 5 days, and it's been fleeced as well. It's had a crop canopy over it to stimulate early growth and to protect it from frost early on.
I don't think people are aware of the difference between potatoes, like a waxy potato, a starchy potato, and that they need to be used for specific recipes, because otherwise you'd get a different outcome each time.
Yeah, it's very evident people don't really know, but a lot of people know. The people who really cook, they make a point of knowing. So, you know.
I've made my whole career of a point of knowing.
Well, there you go. So you know. But we got new things coming along like Lucera, Empress, which people will have to get used to. They've got probably slightly earlier than those. They have element of blight resistance. They've got an element of PCN resistance. Potato cyst nematode, which is a nasty little thing that starts as a little worm. It lays its eggs on the roots of potatoes, and actually having the potato root in the ground stimulates the egg to hatch. So then these little things come out and relay their eggs on the roots. If you get a bad infestation in the field, it can take 20, 30 years to get rid of naturally.
The quicker way to rid a field of PCN is to use chemicals called nematicides, but they're expensive, often come with restrictions, and can of course create other environmental damage.
Now you can see it's just started to tuberise. These are the mother tubers that we planted.
So you mentioned about the fields that you use to seed in being not used before for potatoes, and that is to help prevent there being any sort of cross-contamination of the soils.
If you go on some of the fields that have been growing spuds every 5 years, you'll end up with quite a lot of volunteers, which are not necessarily always easy to...
Lots of volunteers.
A self-set potato that's come out the back of the harvester the last time it was harvested. Very often it will get attacked by an aphid, and the aphid will give it a virus that might be in the volunteer into a seed crop.
Right.
So isolation is quite important. Our biggest issue after getting the field certified is keeping the aphids out. It's good aphid weather at the moment. There's been some quite high pressure already. So we have to make sure we're spraying for aphids every 5 to 6 days, which is a bit onerous, but that's what we have to do. And we use different insecticides every time, but we put a mineral oil in with it as well. So the aphid, when he lands, not only is the aphicide going to kill him, but his bill, he will struggle to stick it into the stem or the leaf of a potato plant because of the oil, which puts a little layer on top.
Yeah.
So it gives us a bit more time for him to die or go somewhere else.
Potato grower James Foskett. Potato farmers have long been fighting disease, the most infamous being the blight that caused the Irish Potato Famine. And even today, researchers are still investigating its origins. Someone who's been known as the Sherlock of Spuds for her investigations into the Irish Potato Famine is distinguished Professor Dr Jean Beagle Ristaino.
I am a plant pathologist at North Carolina State University. In 1845, the potato blight pathogen caused a pandemic in Ireland. But it's not just a disease of the past. This plant disease spread globally and impacts potato production around the world today. In 1845, they didn't understand that a contagion or a pathogen could cause either human, animal, or plant disease. Some thought it was the wrath of God cursing the Irish. Others thought it was just too much rain. But there was a group of scientists, including a woman scientist, Anne-Marie Libert in Belgium, who looked under the microscope and saw a minute fungus-like organism on the leaves. And that was really the beginning of understanding that it was a microbe that was causing the disease.
So are there still some kind of arguments over it? Are academics still arguing about where this started and why it started? Or is it solved now?
Of course, you get a group of scientists in the room and nobody's going to agree on anything. But, there's total agreement that this is a pathogen that caused the disease. It's actually now called an oomycete. It's a water mold. So, in fact, water did make the disease more severe. The controversy in the area came surrounding the source. Where did it come from? In 1845, we had scientists who believed that this pathogen came in with the potatoes and likely from South America, because this is where potatoes were being shipped. In the early 20th century, a group of scientists suggested Mexico was the center of origin. I started delving into this question because in 1845, they weren't shipping potatoes from Mexico. So we started questioning this Mexican theory. My lab started addressing this question using historic outbreak samples from 1845. We sort of did Jurassic Park research. We went to Kew Gardens. There's a big fungarium there. And there were specimens in Ireland. There were specimens in the U.S. So we had this time capsule from 1845, dried leaves that had lesions on them, potato blight lesions.
So we're talking samples of potato leaves. You can work from that.
Yes. When I started this work 20 years ago, people believed, oh, this is impossible. You can't do this. Jurassic Park had just come out. They were reviving dinosaurs. Why not potato blight? But we moved gradually. We had to develop specific DNA techniques that would allow us to amplify the amount of DNA from the pathogen in these lesions. And then from there, sequencing technology was happening so we could sequence the DNA and read the DNA and identify the strain.
For anyone listening, I've got my mouth wide open in shock. I can't even speak for how amazing this is, and this kind of research that has gone into, I suppose it's almost preventative maybe now. Are we looking back so that we learn for the future?
Yes, the pathogen never, it's still with us. And so understanding how pathogens evolve over time and how they respond to chemical management treatments is very important so we can manage the disease better. Right now in our department, we're hiring a new plant scientist that does gene editing. And we're hoping potentially to do a potato project where we can gene edit potatoes. They're not transgenic, so they won't have foreign DNA, but they'll have the right DNA that will make it resist the disease. And these kinds of tools are being used widely now. There's research going on all over the UK right now in this area.
Is it like a superpower mutant potato that could be the answer to all our prayers?
Given that what I know about the last 180 years with this pathogen, let's hope so, but I don't know. We want to be able to control the disease sustainably. And the neat thing about deploying resistant varieties, even just conventionally bred varieties, is if you have resistance, you don't have to use as much fungicide.
Dr Jean Beagle Ristaino from North Carolina State University. Back on the farm in Suffolk, James Foskett has brought us to a field where he's growing organic potatoes.
It's been organic for over 10 years. Of all the organic crops we grow, it's probably one of the easiest because the canopy is quite vigorous. But with organic potatoes, two things are really important. One, you don't want any PCN because you can't put any nematicides on to help control it. You have to rely on varieties that are resistant to it. You also pick varieties that are tolerant to blight to a certain extent. Most of the organic crops are small potatoes or earlies, if that makes sense. We don't grow Maris Piper type big bakers or anything like that, because they're in the ground too long and it's too risky for blight. You lose the whole crop if you're not careful.
So you can use certain substances on the crop to make sure that they're not getting contaminated, but they're natural.
Yes, they're natural. We don't put any pesticides or herbicides on. We use various soap and concentrated garlic mixes to knock the aphids down, which works to a certain extent. We do use a little, from time to time, a few trace elements, things like manganese and magnesium, which all plants need to help them grow. The fertility for the field comes from, well, we grow a lot of cover crops, so we're ploughing in clover and vetch and things like that to give us our nutrients. But we do use some liquid digestate, which we're allowed to use out of a local anaerobic digester plant up the road, and we do manage to grab hold most of the organic chicken muck in East Anglia, so which is their lifelines really.
This is quite huge. It's like something out of Final Destination.
This is a purpose-built seed potato store, and we'll store them in here at 2.5 to 3 degrees from, say, August when they're harvested, right through. Some of them stay in here till the following May or June.
How is there so many potato seed? It's on such a bigger scale than I think anyone could ever imagine.
You have to bear in mind that you might need anything between 4 and 6 tonnes a hectare to plant next year, and they might be worth £500 a tonne, so it's quite an expensive thing to plant. Growing a crop of potatoes is pretty expensive.
When we're in the fields, you can see like the irrigation and the massive sprinklers going over. What happens with that? Where does that come from? Where does the water come from?
So we start irrigating in April, and we probably go on till into October sometimes, depending on the weather. Water's a big issue. All water abstractors who are irrigating their crops have licences from the Environment Agency, which allows them a certain volume of water that they can use every year. We have a huge combination of different sources of water. We have winterfill reservoirs, we have seepage reservoirs, we have boreholes, river water as well. So we have a combination of all sorts. But we're all under the cosh at the moment because a lot of our time-limited licences are coming up for renewal, and the Environment Agency want to take some of our licences back. One of the things we have done, this part of the world, we have the Internal Drainage Board pump a lot of water over the sea wall into the sea or into the river estuaries. That water, we got permission 6-7 years ago to turn it around, bring it back inland and put it into reservoirs for irrigation, which is like a new source of water. And there's 3 or 4 other projects just waiting to go of the same thing, which gives us a different source of water.
So innovative. You're on it. I am the biggest advocate for potatoes. Love them. I eat them every single day. But there has been a drop in people eating potatoes. Do you reckon it's the diet? I know, like, in the early noughties, it's all like, no carbs, oh my God, you can't eat potatoes. What could it have been? Is there something else that might be going on, or is it literally just what we see online?
I think there's a combination of things, to be honest. For me, the one thing that's happened is we don't have many good cooks in the country. People haven't got the time to cook potatoes. You tell me how many people you know who will go out and roast potatoes for Sunday lunch.
You can get a freezer bag, can't you, now? And it takes half an hour.
And our early potatoes, if you can't open the packet and tip them straight into boiling water, they don't want to know. They don't want to peel a new potato, do they? So that's where some of the production's disappeared, because it's ready meals, quickness. Yeah. Nobody's got the time. So
there's a bit of that time poor and money poor as well at the same time at the minute. Absolutely. It just feels like that's...
And I've got 4 daughters, and when they all went to university, they'd all go back with a bag of potatoes, because I tell you run out of money. Mm-hmm. Cheapest meal is a baked potato with a bit of cheese on. I think if people had the opportunity or went out to farm shops and bought bags of spuds to put in their shed down the garden, they'd have cheap and cheerful potatoes for a long while.
Well, you can get a 20 kilo, 25 kilo bag of spuds. If you keep them in a dark, cold and not damp place, they'll keep for ages.
Well,
but everyone
3 or 4 months,
people put them in the fridge and they go wet and soggy and everything, but it needs to be well ventilated, dry, dark, and then you're pretty good, and cold.
Yeah. And you don't want to put them in the shed now. You want to do it when it gets to September, October, when they've got set skins and
The ending sort of thing for me, right, which is nothing to do with anything of kind of intellect, is favourite variety of potato and favourite way to eat potatoes.
Good grief. It's a big question.
I know, it's a big one, yeah.
I told you earlier, as an early potato, I love Charlotte. For baked potatoes, Marfona early in the season, probably a Piper or an Edward later on. But actually, if you get a big Charlotte later on, you try baking it because they're fantastic.
James grows a lot of potatoes here in Suffolk, but nationally we're eating far fewer than we used to. And producer Natalie is here because you can tell us a bit more about this.
Back in the 1970s, the average UK household was buying nearly 1.5 kilos of fresh potatoes every week. Now, that was a long time ago, but fast forward to today, and that amount has dropped to just over 300 grams. But while fresh potatoes have fallen out of favour, processed potatoes like chips and frozen mash have, you guessed it, increased a lot. In fact, processed potatoes now make up nearly 3/4 of all potato purchases we make. It's a shift, of course, driven by convenience and changing tastes and the rise of quick, ready-to-eat options. And Poppy, I know you're a fan of the 15-hour potato, which takes a lot of time, 15 hours to make. But there are quicker ways to cook potatoes, right? What are some of your favourite ways?
Yeah, if I am in a rush and I need to get some potatoes cooked, mashed potato, you can get it done in half an hour easy. You looked very shocked then. Can you not get it done in half an hour?
Depends how quickly. Yeah, the mashing can sometimes take a while.
Well, there's always a solution. Push it through a sieve.
Really?
Or get a ricer, get one of them potato ricers. But mash is always a fairly easy one. And then parboiling and roasting. If you need something quick, you can parboil for about 7 minutes and then get it into. You can also do it in a pan. So you can get little cubes of potato, parboil them into a pan, butter, salt, whatever else, herbs and spices that you want, and let them just cook off and they become golden and nice and cooked in the middle. They can be very quick. I do think that people see a potato and think, oh, that's going to take an hour in the oven. Which, if you throw it in the microwave for a few minutes first, it doesn't. So there are quicker ways, but sometimes convenience does win. I can't bash a bag of frozen chips. I've always got some in my freezer just in case. And they're great in the air fryer.
Do you also think that some people are eating less potatoes now because of worries about carbs?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a millennial. So I remember when we were younger, all the shows about you can't eat carbs. It was like rice, bread, potatoes. I think that's still kind of in us somewhere, but it's like, they're not actually that bad for you. Everything in moderation. I have them completely out of moderation. I eat a lot of them. But I think there is something that they're seen as this humble, comforting family food, but there's also something that I think is still scary to some people because it is seen as this heavy carb, bad for you tuber, which it's not actually that. Well, I don't think it is anyway.
They're really nutritious as well.
They're actually nutritious.
Yeah.
So instead of having something like a processed sandwich, like bread, which has been, and I'm not trying to slander bread. I love bread, but it's got so many more different things in it. Especially if you're getting kind of like the white loaf, which is one of my favourites. Whereas a potato is a whole food. It's just one singular thing that's been grown in the ground. So I think for me, they shouldn't be as scary as they are. But people still, I get called fat every day on the internet because I cook potatoes and eat potatoes. But that's just, let people be people, whatever. Just eat the potatoes, enjoy, have balance.
Potatoes are having a bit of a moment on social media, aren't they? Not just you with your channels, but there's also a guy called Spudman.
Yeah.
And his Spud Army.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is he changing people's minds about potatoes, do you think?
He's changing something because people queue up for hours. So Spudman, who's actually called Ben, his name is Ben Newman. There you go. And he has got a jacket potato van in Tamworth. He started recording everything for TikTok and Instagram. So he does point of views and he just posts everything all day. And there are queues for hours. Hugh Jackman turned up. Ryan Reynolds turned up and got a jacket potato in Tamworth.
And these are just normal jacket potatoes?
He does 1.5 jacket potatoes per person, which I think is quite special. Yeah, it's blown up on social media. So there are some other people as well. There's a lot of jacket potato army warriors out there, and people love them. Just pure comfort, but it's more than that. It's an ingredient that allows us to understand so much more about history. Let's listen to Professor Rebecca Earle from the University of Warwick's thoughts on that one.
Well, I think it's important that we know about the history of ordinary life, and that we know that what we eat and how we feel about what we eat and where it came from and the things that matter to us is part of history. Mm-hmm. And that's just as much a part of history as the ending of the Second World War or the political debates that might have accompanied the Reformation, or any of that. That ordinary lives are embedded in history, and our ordinary lives are historically meaningful.
It links people, doesn't it? There's always a connection, especially with potatoes as well, because they are, like we've said before, known in every single culture, country, dish. They are just integral to comfort, I think, for a lot of people. So there's just so much more to potatoes that we need to learn and discover and love. But I just want to say thank you so much. Professor Rebecca Earle. Yeah, so maybe I didn't ace Mastermind, but I've now learnt so much more. The potato isn't just like a comfort food. There's a whole world, there's a whole history and thousands of years behind the potato we have today. And there is so much there's good and bad parts of it, and we don't know where it's going to go next. And it's an ingredient that we all need to put a little bit of respect on its name and just start adoring the humble potato. I will never look at a roast potato on my Sunday dinner the same way ever again. Thanks for listening. This episode of the Food Programme was presented by me, Poppy O'Toole, and was produced in Bristol for BBC Audio by Natalie Donovan.
Hi guys, this is Rylan, and I'm here to tell you about How to Be in Love from BBC Sounds. Now, as a single divorcee, I feel ready to find love again, but I want to see if there's a better way of going about it. In this series, I'm going to sit down with 12 incredible guests who are really going to help me rediscover what love truly means and how I can find it again. People like Stephen Fry, Louis Theroux, Matt and Emma Willis, and many more. So join me on this journey as I explore how to be in love. Listen on BBC Sounds.